Hi, this is Tanya Morimoto. She's a graduate student here in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at Stanford University, and she is the awesome principal designer of Hapkit. She's going to explain the assembly process now.
That's right. Today we'll be walking through all the steps in this assembly document. Hopefully between the document and this video, the process for assembling your own Hapkit will be both straightforward and successful. I suggest that you have both the assembly document as well as the video handy as we go through this process. Okay, let's get started. The first step is to make sure that you have everything in your Hapkit. Refer to the parts list as well as the first image on your assembly document to make sure that you have everything. In addition to the parts provided in the kit, you may also need a ruler as well as a 2.4 millimeter screwdriver. Here we have all the acrylic parts laid out just as you do in your assembly document. It's important to notice that each of the acrylic pieces has a number, 1 through 8, labeled somewhere in the corner on the piece. It's important to keep this in mind during the assembly process. So let's begin by assembling the Hapkit frame. The first step is to assemble our Hapkit frame. This is easiest done with a partner since the super glue has a tendency to dry very quickly. It might be helpful to do it over newspaper, but be careful not to super glue all your pieces to the paper. The super glue you got inside your kit may look slightly different than this, but in general you need to screw the cap on in order to break through the initial seal in the super glue. Find the piece with the number 2 label and apply the glue to this edge as well as on the sides of each of these tabs. Then, with the number 2 facing outwards, place the tab inside the hole on the front piece. Now, these pieces may take a little bit of time to dry, so you might want to place them aside for a couple minutes while you do something else in the assembly process. For now, we're going to keep going with piece number 3. Similarly, just apply the glue to both the sides as well as the tabs and place it inside the other hole on the front piece. It's important to try and make sure that these pieces are as straight as possible and as perpendicular to the bottom edge of the front plate as you can possibly make it. At this point, you might want to apply pressure or even just leave this piece off to the side to dry. Once you feel that your initial frame is relatively dry, you want to next take the base piece, piece number 4. Make sure that this number 4 is labeled and facing upwards. Then apply glue to the bottom edge of the support pieces, as well as this front plate. And again, apply some to the sides of each of these tabs. Then place this inside the base, and they should all each of the pieces should fit inside the slots nicely. Again, apply pressure and let this sit for a few minutes off to the side to dry. Once you feel that everything has been secured to the base and it's not wiggling at all, find piece number 5 as well as the 2 wing nuts and the 3/4 inch screws, which you can see here. Look like this. Now, depending on whether you're right-handed or left-handed, there's 2 different sets of instructions at this point. Since I'm right-handed, I'm going to take the piece number 5 with the 5 facing up, flip it over this way, and with the number 5 facing this, the back of the front plate, we're going to use these 3/4 inch screws through the hole and use these wing nuts to tighten. Now at this point you don't need to tighten it all the way. This is just to keep this bar in place while we assemble the rest of the kit. Okay, at this point the frame of the Hapkit is assembled and we're going to move on to the sector pulley. Now we're on to step 3, assembling the Hapkit sector pulley. Next, look for your colored pieces of acrylic. Each person's going to have a different colored Hapkit. Here we have a red one. Make sure you find, it will be labeled 6, 7, and 8. So as you notice, these two pieces, 7 and 8, look very similar, but we're going to start with number 7, which has a smaller hole area at the bottom here. Place glue on the inside of piece number 7, and on piece number 6, it's helpful to put glue on this part as well. And attach number 7 with the 7 facing outwards to this lower tab. Once you feel that this is dry, you can take piece number 8 and apply glue to both the back side as well as, again, inside of this tab. And with the 8 facing outwards, you're going to place it on this upper tab of the sector pulley. Now these pieces in particular might take a little bit of time to dry, so once again, leave it to the side as you continue. Next, take the neoprene strip inside your kit and remove the paper backing to expose the sticky part. Now sometimes both the paper backing as well as the adhesive will both come off. Don't worry about this and just use super glue if this happens to you. So now with the sticky side up, or with the glue on the top if your sticky part comes off, line up the edge of the sector pulley to the edge of your neoprene and roll the sector pulley along the edge to try and get as smooth a fit as possible. You'll probably have a little bit of neoprene left over at the end, and you can just go ahead and cut this part off. Next, take the flanged bushing and making sure that this flanged part is on the same side as the etched marks at the bottom of your sector pulley. Place it inside the hole. Place the shoulder screw through the bushing, and next find your shaft collar. Looks something like this. Also take your 3/32 inch hex key, and you may need to unscrew this set screw a little bit in order to fit it over the back of the shoulder screw. And then tighten this set screw back in place. Now at this point, it's important that the sector pulley is not too loose, like this, in between this flange and the shaft collar. So at this point, this is too loose. You need to loosen it, loosen the set screw, and pinch this a little bit tighter in between. You also don't want too much friction like this, where you can't even rotate the sector pulley as you're holding on to the shaft collar. It may take a couple tries in order to get the right fit. Now on to step 4, attaching the parts to the Hapkit frame. Find your M2 screws, as well as the washers, and your 1.5 millimeter hex key. Now, the washers should slip easily onto the screws. And we're going to use them to attach the motor onto this frame. Line up 2 of the holes of the motor with these 2 openings in the front plate. And use these screws in order to lock it into place. Now it's important that the motor is secure on the Hapkit frame, but you don't want to screw down the screws so tight that, that you screw them into the motor. Next, find your two 3D printed parts. They should look like this. And take your magnet, and we're going to glue it to the inside of this magnet holder. Just apply a little bit of glue to the inside, and the magnet should slip in easily. Now while that's drying, we're going to take the drive wheel and we're going to press fit it onto the front drive shaft of the motor. Now this part may take a little bit of force in order to get it on, and if you feel as though it's not pushing on well enough, you can actually use this same hex key from before in order to sort of clean out the inside and get rid of any wax that may be left inside. Now, the drive wheel does not need to be pushed all the way onto the shaft of the motor. It should be something close to this, though. Similarly, take the magnet holder and press fit it onto the back shaft of the motor. Be careful not to press too hard on the plastic part itself, and apply most of the pressure onto the magnet so as to not to break the piece. Similarly, this does not need to be pressed fully into the back of the, onto the shaft. Now, using your 1/8 inch hex key, which should be the largest one that you have, take your sector pulley, and we're going to now attach it to the front plate of our Hapkit frame. You should see a hole in the front of this height adjustment bar that has threads, and so it should make it relatively easy to screw the sector pulley into the hole. Now, as you can tell, on this shoulder screw, there's a green sort of pellet. And once that green pellet enters into the threads, it may become a little bit harder to turn, but just keep going, it's okay. Now you want to tighten this until there's approximately 1/4 inch between the front plate here and the back of your sector pulley. The next part is a little bit tricky. We're going to adjust this height bar in order to obtain the right amount of friction between the sector pulley and the drive wheel. So as you can see at the back of the height adjustment bar, one of the holes in the height adjustment bar is just a hole, and versus the other side, as you can see on the front plate here, there's a slot. So we're going to tighten the wing nut for the screw that's inside the hole, and we're going to use this slot to adjust the amount of friction between the sector pulley and the drive wheel. So as you can see here, this is too high. We're not getting any friction in between the two. But if you press this height adjustment bar down too far, you can barely move your sector pulley, and that's too much resistance. So it may take a few tries in order to adjust this correctly. So the goal is to have this neoprene strip lightly compressed against the drive wheel. There should be enough friction force, though, so that when you turn the drive wheel with your fingers, it will move the sector pulley as well. But again, we don't want so much resistance that we can't even move our pulley. Now, step 5, we're going to set up the electronics. Find your 2 small pieces to mount our PCB. And once again, this is our last step with gluing. Take each of these pieces and apply a little bit of glue on the tabs. And be careful which one of these pieces you put in which of these two slots in the back of your base. So we want this slightly larger piece to go in the hole like this. And this smaller piece should fit in here. Now once these are dry, find your 1/2-inch screws as well as the nuts. And we're going to attach the Hapkit board using these mounts. It's important that we attach it in this order. So you have the magnet and then you have the board. Make sure that this sensor is facing the magnet. And then we have the mounts on the opposite side. Then using these screws, place them through the mounts and secure it using these nuts. Now this is the point where having that 2.4 millimeter screwdriver could come in handy. So now let's just double check, make sure that your MR sensor is indeed facing the magnet. And now we're going to attach the motor. So as you can see, we're going to loosen these on the back of the PCB here. You can see they're labeled M+ and M-, and we're going to want to place the red lead into the top one labeled M+. So this, and you can just use the same screwdriver to tighten that in place. Similarly, put the black one into the one labeled M-. The last step is attaching the force-sensitive resistor, or FSR, onto the handle. So what we have to do first is we're going to press these leads from the FSR into the female connector, Molex connector here. So what you want to make sure is you press it into these holes, and that, when you're looking at the top of the FSR here, you want the black lead on the left and the red lead on the right. Now, depending on which way you assembled your Hapkit, you're going to attach the FSR on different sides. Basically, you want to attach the FSR to the same side of the handle that you can see this square hole on your height adjustment bar. So remove the backing to expose the adhesive on the back of the FSR and apply some super glue onto the back of this Molex connector. Now this connector should press into the side of the sector pulley into the little slot on the side here. And the top of the FSR should stick nicely to the back of the handle. You can then take your cable and route it through the hole in the height adjustment bar. And if you bring it around to the back you can see there's a place to connect it into the PCB. Like this. Now your entire Hapkit should be assembled, and we should just go through a couple checks to make sure that it's assembled correctly. The first thing that we want to check is to make sure that the amount of friction on the drive wheel is adequate. So you want to make sure that there's enough friction. So if you place your finger at the bottom of the drive wheel and you try moving this sector pulley back and forth, your finger should not be able to stop the sector pulley from moving. On the other hand, you want to make sure there's enough friction so that this can easily move back and forth. The next check that we want to make sure is that this Hapkit board is secure. You don't want it wiggling around at all. The last thing you want to check is to make sure that the magnet is approximately 1 centimeter away from the front edge of this sensor. Now your Hapkit is fully assembled, and when you are ready to program next week, you can plug in your power supply to the bottom of the board like this, and you can take your USB cable, which we will use to plug into the computer in order to program the board, into the side of the PCB like this. And that's it.
Thanks, Tanya, for the Hapkit demo.
No problem.
And I wish you all a successful Hapkit assembly.